I tried making the lists and all the things, doing certain rituals that friends recommended. And not that those were bad, but they didn't lead to lasting, sustainable, happy relationships for me, meaningful relationships. What worked for me was really digging down into the core values and making decisions from there.
Hello, this is Joey Chandler, and welcome back to the Love Launch Podcast. This is where I talk to expert entrepreneurs and entertainers about what love means to them and how we all can have more of it in our lives. And today, I have one of my true heroes in life. He's been someone, every time that I thought I had a good idea, Paul has been doing it for about a year. He was leading the charge in social awareness among white bald guys before anybody that I knew. He became a marathon runner. He's doing ultra marathons. He is just doing everything. And of course, when I started talking about purpose-based relationships, he called me up and said, "Hey, I've been doing this for 2 years. I have this thing called value-based relationships. And so I want to come talk to you." So Paul, it's my great honor. And of course, you're always ahead of me. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, Joey, you're too kind and you're awesome. Please don't discount yourself. Not on my watch.
I have no discounting. I just have to acknowledge, you even lost your hair before me. So
I guess, yeah. Now that I'll take, I lost in my late 20s, early 30s. I started going bald. So that one I'll take. The other, you're awesome, man. You're doing awesome things. I'm not going to sign up for anything other than Joey is awesome.
No, I appreciate it. Well, Paul, the whole idea here is we're talking about what love means to it means to us and as individuals, because it's something that we don't talk about very often. But before we hop into that, please, why don't you just give a little introduction of what who you are and what you do, so that people get a sense of that.
Sure, Joey. So basically, I've had 2 careers, and my first career that people kind of might resonate with is I was basically in community mental health, did a lot of community organizing. I was the white guy with a degree here in New Mexico. I got into New Mexico in 1993, a very diverse place. But I had a degree and was willing to do out-of-the-box things, like working with some of the local tribes here in northern New Mexico, where I lived at the time. Now I'm in Albuquerque, working to bring restorative practices back to those communities when young people and their families started dealing with heart issues. So that'd be an example of what I did for, engaging young men as fathers and working to end intergenerational patterns around domestic violence or substance abuse in families using innovative approaches, right? So that's what I did for 15 years. Loved that work, but burned out, got compassion fatigue after 15 years. And reinvented myself right as the conscious business and social entrepreneur movements kind of took off in the world and got a lot of traction. And so I've been in that space, in the space of working with social entrepreneurs and conscious leaders for also January 1st was 15 years. I can't believe it's been that long. So anyway, bringing values and our understanding of positive impact into the world of business and learning how to harness business as a force for good. I've been doing that now for 15 years.
That's amazing. I just love how the thread that you always have, you're very deliberate in your actions and you move forward with velocity and you're willing to change, but also there's this step-by-step process that you take. And it's really awesome to watch.
Well, thank you, Joey.
Okay. And you're also a podcaster.
Yes, I am. I like to joke. My name is Paul and I'm podcast obsessed. So when I heard you were starting a podcast, I was so excited. I'm the host of the Awarepreneurs podcast. We just published this week, episode 241. And we've become one of the better known social entrepreneur oriented podcasts in the world, according to Listen Notes, which is like the Google of podcasting. And they give us some metrics of, kind of on a percentile basis. So Listen Notes says we're one of the top 1.5% podcasts on the whole planet, which is a little weird to think about that. But yeah, I've been doing it long enough that have gotten some traction.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, I'll ask you about what you learned about that later on, because there's just so much that you must have learned from doing that many episodes. Because I've learned a lot doing 5 talking about love in just the last 5. But let's move on to love. So for you, Paul, what does love mean to you?
Well, let me just say, Joey, that I'm not in any way positioning myself as an expert. I've been divorced twice. have had some messy relationships, and am in no way, like I said before we hit record, Joey's like, do you want to pitch anything? Do you want to, what could people? I'm like, no, if you've got issues with love, talk to Joey, right? I've got other people. I am not a love expert, but I can say that I'm 2.5, not a little more than 2 years into the best relationship of my life. And when I heard what you were doing, the way I got here, I called it values-based dating and values-based relationships. So like, what does it mean? Mostly it's meant a lot of pain and confusion, if I'm totally transparent. And I know you enough, Joey, that that's what you would want me to say. The real is,
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some fantastic relationship experiences, but also a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. A wonderful child came out of my first marriage, and I adore my child, and totally super grateful for that. But there was a lot of suffering for all involved. So what it means, it's been an area of uncertainty and a place of a lot of confusion. And it was through the process, like I learned how to do this in business first, how you kind of sink into a few core values and then bake those into everything you were doing. And I had tried making the lists and all the things, doing certain rituals that friends recommended. And not that those were bad, but they didn't lead to lasting, sustainable, happy relationships for me, meaningful relationships. What worked for me was really digging down into the core values and making decisions from there. And I was talking to my girlfriend about it last night. I said, hey, I'm like going on this podcast. Are you okay? And she said, you tell them I'm so happy that if this helps anybody as happy as we are, then please share anything that would be of service. So what does love mean for me? Lots of confusion and suffering before I kind of landed on bringing more core values into the front and center and guiding from there. And once I've made that choice, a lot, not that there have been any hard moments or conversations, but so much more grace, ease, and happiness.
Absolutely. And I would say as an entrepreneur too, like it's interesting how that approach really works on the entrepreneur side. There's so much before you really get your values set and you really get clear on what you want to bring to your business and the experience that you want your employees or your staff or your clients to have kind of at a core level. Until you get that, you struggle. And it doesn't matter how good you are, and the people who are really good at business, they just have the sense of what they want people to experience.
Exactly.
And it's so obvious in business, but it's interesting how not obvious it is in love.
In both situations, both business and in love, it's really easy to get caught in chasing shiny objects, right? And I have, I've been a meditator for 30 years. I've been thinking about living consciously. It's not that I haven't thought about living a deliberate life. I've been trying to do that as best I can for a really long time. And now see that there was a way in which I didn't quite have my rudder in the water as steady as is wanted in having stable, safe, meaningful, rich, alive relationships in these there's so much chaos in the world right now, and trying to navigate either a business or a relationship without having that steady oar in the water. I tried, but I realized that I was, even with all that practice and all that meditation and all that personal growth, workshops and therapy and all the men's circles for decades, I still was chasing shiny objects without realizing it. Absolutely. Now I realize it, but I didn't know it at the time. And that was my contribution to that suffering that I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? Like when you look back and you have this moment and there's a very clear moment of, this happened then. And then things
totally
changed, and you're like, why didn't I see this?
Wait, is it really that easy? I have 3 core values, and that entirely, it changed my relation. It can't be that easy, right?
Right.
Not that it can't be that simple. Easy is the wrong. It's actually takes a lot of courage, at least for me, to relate this way. And it leads to some really courageous conversations. So easy is the wrong word, but simple. It can't be that simple. And it turns out, Joey, it is. And like, I'm kind to younger Paul, that he didn't know that, but it's also like, duh.
Oh, it's so like it, and it can happen. I love that you talked about courage though, because I was actually I was talking to a young man actually from Arizona, your neck of the woods. He's a photographer, wedding photographer, an elopement photographer.
Oh, wow.
He's like, big weddings are great, but I love working with people on the small side. And he talks about the courage that is needed to say, I want to have this type of wedding, and to go against the trend.
Yeah.
And I think love, I'm really seeing like courage is one of the foundational key points of love.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, again, especially in this environment of, there's, whether we're talking about wars that people are like, could this degenerate into a world war? We've got pandemics and racial reckoning and economic chaos with like inflation and housing costs, and food prices are up 20%. There's so many opportunities, political polarization, right? There's so many opportunities for us to be triggered or to run in, even if we're pretty steady or very steady, we're running into humans. I'm a neuroscience geek. So we're running into humans on a regular basis who are, quote, dysregulated. There's just so many things to have an opportunity to kind of come off of center. And all of us are managing more of that, whether it's at work or somebody we love, we have a political disagreement, or somebody's really fired up about something. There's a lot of injustice in our world and somebody's really fired up with it, but we're like really tired and we're trying. There's so many opportunities to feel stretched beyond what one human can take in and digest and metabolize. And then you come home, or, even I don't live together, but you start interfacing with somebody, whether it's by text or it's date night or whatever, and you're navigating whether it's what should we eat for dinner, or what's going on in our sex lives, or like family stuff. I have family stuff, she has family, like there's so many opportunities to feel stretched beyond what a human can metabolize and snap or withdraw or pressure or whatever, in less pressurized circumstances. Just be like, dude, it's just dinner, relax, right? It's just like a weekend in May and we'll figure it out, right? Like the family thing and how that's all going to go down. But when it's so pressurized, if we don't have that steady oar in the water, it's really easy to somebody's going to come off center no matter what, because we're imperfect humans, beautiful, but imperfect humans. But right now, more so than any other time in my lifetime, there's just a lot of that.
And then add in dating apps.
Oh God, right?
All of that. You got like
all the shiny objects, Joey.
All the shiny objects, exactly. So you've been talking about having a rudder and these 3 core principles. So please explain to how this came to be, and tell us what we need to know about these.
Yeah. So I wish I could remember his name, and I don't. I'm trying to find out. I can't find it, but I was listening to a podcast episode on leadership, and I'm not a particularly militaristic person, but this particular person's reference point, he was a Navy SEAL leader, and he was teaching leadership in the context of Navy SEALs. If anybody's listening to this and you don't know much about the Navy SEAls, they're the most elite special forces unit in the US military, right? What he was saying is, the Navy SEALs started out, as the name SEAL would imply, they were special operations in an aquatic environment, right? So water, they, dive this and, rubberized boats that you could pack up and hike into the jungle, whatever. But they have since like expanded into, they're doing missions. They were doing missions in Afghanistan in the desert. They just became a super high level beyond any one geographic environment, like an ocean or water environment, to like, they were the people that got called when the US was trying to go after Osama bin Laden. even though Afghanistan and that whole terrain is a very desert environment. They're just elite beyond any one particular ecosystem, which is fascinating to me. So their high performance is not domain specific. It's high performance across, they could get dropped anywhere. Their buzzer could go off in the middle of the night and they could be going to, the ocean environment in a tropical environment, or they could be going to like the mountains of Afghanistan in the snowy desert, right? They never know. But what's consistent, he said, is they learn how to operate as a team. So think about that in terms of relate, not an I, but a we. Very important. Have each other's backs. And he said, in addition to the actual physical and technical training, like how do you use communication gears, or how do you use certain weapons, or medical training, the thing they spend a lot of time in, especially for the leaders, is values and how you lead by values. And he said, he told this story, and this is what light bulb went on, Joey. I was listening to it from a business leadership perspective, but I was like, oh, in terms of relationships. He said this: when you're a Navy SEAL, your buzzer could go off at any time. And in the middle of the night, you could get on a helicopter. You get briefed a little bit before you get on the helicopter. And then you're like on the helicopter and you're like on the mission, trying to get as many details as you can. But like you don't have a complete data set. And he said, middle of the night, you could be jumping out of they learn how to parachute. You could be jumping out of a helicopter or a plane, parachuting into God knows where in the middle of the night. And people might start shooting at you before you even hit the ground. Like you have no idea how it's going to, you have a theory, but you have no idea what's actually going to happen. You try to make your best plan, but there's a saying in the military, no plan survives the first point of contact. And I was like, that sounds like dating, right? So he said, here's how we learned how to handle that as leaders in a Navy SEAL environment. He said, we lead by values. And he said, when you're jumping out of a helicopter in the middle of the night, you can't have a list of 15 or 50 core values. He said, most human beings under pressure can easily remember 3, maybe 4. If you go more than that, you're playing an exercise in like corporate, like nice. Here's our 15 core values on the wall when you walk into our offices. Aren't they nice? They're all pretty. Nobody can remember them because under pressurized, stressful environments, businesses like that, being a SEAL, jumping out of helicopters like that. And for Paul, dating is like that, right? You have your plan, but then you like get on a date and, oh, this place is closed, or like one person wants to be a little more physical than the other person. And that's awkward. All those things happen in dating. I was like, what if I just picked 3 core values and tried dating from that? And he said, if you can do 3, you're going to do better. And by the way, what he did as a leader, he learned right before they jumped out of the helicopter or whatever, the moment they like put their hands into the circle and there's like a group of however many people, 6 or 8, they do small teams, put their hands in the circle, they say their core values out loud, and then they jump out of the helicopter into the great unknown. And he said, we may forget the plan, it may not work out, but we'll never forget our core values. And we're going to do our mission based on the core values. I was like, that's genius, right? So that was the moment. That was a light bulb. And I was already doing that in business, but like, I was like, what if dating was like that? Huh? Wow.
And was it the team has 3 core values, or each individual member of the team has 3?
A team, they've
decided that these are our 3
they've
core
decided
values.
This is us. This is who we are, right? Now, at the point I was single, coming out of a relationship, it was a complicated situation that involved a medical injury. It was very complicated. So, I was listening to this and kind of digesting what had just happened and metabolized something that started pretty well, but came off the rails. And, came to Albuquerque. I was living in Santa Fe, which is like a 10x smaller city, a very small gene pool for dating. And I came to like my first time in a city since I had been in grad school in Boston, like 30 years before. I was like, all right, time to play, right? Kind of digested, licked my wounds a little bit. All right, now and I defined my 3 core values. I'll tell you what they are. My 3 core values were, I'm Jewish. So in Hebrew, it's called tikkun. Tikkun literally means to repair the world or work to make the world a better place. It's oftentimes translated as social justice, but I like that more literal repair of the world or working to make the world a better place. You know me, Joey. It's a huge value of mine. Yep. It's why I'm so passionate about social entrepreneurship. And I just realized that's not a value that everybody has. Not everybody wakes up and thinks about how can I make this world, it's kind of messy out there. Some people are just like, I want to take care of me and mine. And like, if that's good, I'm good. And I'm not wired that way. And if somebody is wired that way, I get, there's just a lot of tension and conflict. I don't think that way. Culturally, as a Jew, we're taught tikkun olam, the great healing is something we're supposed to be working towards. It's just in my bones. I can't not be obsessed about that question. Not even just like it's important. It's like it's what I talk about with my friends. It's what I do for work. It's just so baked into who I am. If somebody can't deal with my level of commitment to that and doesn't have to be the way I do it, but do they wake up thinking about their corner of the world with some degree of robust energy? Because if they don't, it's just not going to work. It's just how I'm wired. So that's number one, tikkun. Number two is mutuality. I'm a really strong man and I have a master's degree in counseling. That was my first career. I listened and have done personal development and meditation. I'm also physically quite strong. I used to be a football player. Now I'm an ultra marathoner. Like I'm physically, a friend of mine said, do you know how you make the samurai sword, which was called a katana, right? The way you make a samurai sword is you bake metal over and over again, and then you smash it in on itself like thousands of times, right? And I started doing batterers intervention work when I was 21 years old, right? I've just been in intense situations and leading men's groups and dealing with intergenerational trauma on the reservations here in New Mexico. Like I've just had experiences that most men that look like me haven't had. Oftentimes been the only white person in a room. I've lived out of the box life, off the grid. I've just done things that most people haven't done. I'm a little bit like a katana, right? I'm strong, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And what has sometimes happened in my life, not just in dating, but certainly in dating, is I'm attracted to women, and many women aren't used to that kind of like, maybe the guy's physically strong, but like he doesn't have any friends and he leans in on me too much. I have like this, partners have said to me, will you talk to me more and stop talking to your, like I have a robust network. Like anyway, what can happen, some of my experience has been that I wind up giving and supporting a lot and not feeling that mutuality, and then I get resentful, and resentment is one of the biggest killers in a relationship. So like proactively saying, hey, I'm a really strong man. I'm not asking more than is fair, but I have a habit of not paying attention to mutuality. And then we're like 2 years in and I'm pissed and you don't even know what's going on and it comes out sideways. So let me just be really upfront about, hey, I'm a strong man. I'm happy. I love to cook. I'll feed you. I'll rub your feet. I love to give. And what oftentimes happens, at least in my experience, is non-mutual relationships. I get resentful and that has a negative effect. So let me just be honest. I'm looking for a mutual relationship. That's the second core value.
Yes.
The last one is adventure. I get bored easily. I'm like have a high performance nervous system. In this weekend on Saturday, I'm running from one end of the mountains here in Albuquerque to the other. This is what I do for fun on a Saturday. It's 27 miles, probably be about 4,500 vertical feet. And by the way, there's a lot of snow up there. So we'll be post-holing through probably knee-deep snow, at least some of the time. Probably take us 8 to 10 hours, and I'm 54 years old, right? That's fun for me. And that's in preparation for an adventure I'm doing 3 weeks from now, where we're running across the Grand Canyon there and back in one day, 46 miles, 11,000 vertical feet. There might be some snow there. This is what I do for fun. I love adventure. I love getting out of the box. I don't need somebody to be an ultra marathon or a power lifter, but like if if somebody's idea of a Friday night is always sitting on the couch watching them, I'm not against sitting on the couch watching a movie, but if that's the pattern, that's all, we're not a fit. Like, I don't care if the adventure is let's go to New York and go check out art museums, or let's go to the wilderness and do something really wild like that. But somebody who has their own version of adventure and trying new experiences, whether it's a food adventure or an outdoor adventure or a museum adventure, I'm wired for that. And if somebody doesn't have some interest in that, we're going to have some problems. It's just not a good fit, right? So that's it. 3 words: Tikkun, mutuality, and adventure.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, there's so much. And you came up with this, you heard this podcast, you just did some processing, you figured out your words.
Yeah.
And then how did you present this? How, like, what happened after you start to get grounded in it, leading up to meeting your current partner?
I just brought that into so it was about a year of dating. Again, it was in the city of Albuquerque, and I had been living in smaller communities. So I just dated and had fun. I dated women who were older than me, dated younger than me, women from different cultures, women who were very physically active and women who were not. Like, I just, if there was some interest, if I got asked out a lot, and I asked people out a lot, right? And we just go have an experience. But while I was out, let me give you an example. I went out with a woman, absolutely stunningly beautiful, very, very successful, type A personality. But the entire time we were there, she owned a business and also had several children who were fairly young. She was a little bit younger than me. And the entire time we went to a coffee date, and the entire time we were in that coffee date, she was either talking about herself or interacting on her phone for either business or family reasons. And it wasn't so much that she had some things that were emerging in terms of her business or her kids, but as soon as she stopped doing that, she started talking about herself. There was no mutuality. I saw it in seconds. And in the past, she had literally almost made it to the Olympics. She was absolutely ripped, absolutely brilliant, absolutely stunningly gorgeous, and a very successful business owner. She was a shiny object who I knew in the space of 20 minutes seemed to have real problems with mutuality. She just couldn't do it. She couldn't stop herself from opening her mouth and talking, and didn't ask me once about my life till towards the end of the date, when she kind of realized how much she'd been talking, and sort of like threw in without any energy or curiosity whatsoever. But I'm probably supposed to say, tell me about your work now, after she kind of sucked up all the air in the room in our, so we probably spent about 50 minutes together. And by about 30 minutes, I knew, even though she had all these great qualities of being gorgeous and ripped and smart and had a ton of money, that we were not a fit. And it was like game over, literally on first date. And I knew it and told her that, like I think I texted that. I didn't say it in person. I didn't say a lot, but I knew to myself, nope, mutuality, crossed her off the list. Other situations, it was more like, this is a really cool person. One person I went to became an activity buddy. She actually did check most of those. She wasn't particularly adventurous, but there wasn't a lot of like physical chemistry. And it was like, she's just a really nice person. So we started going for hikes, and we went to a museum, and I met her kids, and I met her mom. Like, she just became a friend, right? And it was like, so I didn't have an agenda. The intensity of like, I'm going to find a partner and I'm going to do it in 1 or 2 or 3 dates with, it's just like, I'm just going to go out and have experiences. And I got to meet incredible women, just amazing. Some of them became friends, right? And I got clear, this one doesn't seem to have a lot of energy on Tikkun. All right, how do I respond to that? Do I say anything? I didn't have like a rule book. I just noticed, this person doesn't seem to do mutuality very well. This person seems to be pretty comfortable in a fairly limited scope of their life, and doing things outside of that seems to bring them discomfort instead of excitement. That's something I'm going to notice. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, right? And sometimes it led to courageous conversations. I remember bringing up with a woman who had a lot of good qualities, but she was referencing a certain religious group. I'm Jewish, a progressive activist Jew, and she was in a more very conservative Christian church here in Albuquerque that on almost every social issue that I personally believe in, they're on the other side. We're on different sides. she's talking about bringing her kids to camp there and they're studying music there, whatever. And I said something. I said, you're really interesting, really smart. And I noticed that you're bringing up this church several times. I'm a Jew. I'm pretty an activist Jew. I care a lot about social issues. And I'm curious how that might be for you. She got really offended, Joey. Well, are you saying that this is wrong? I'm just saying, no, I just noticed there's a difference here, right? She got super offended. We never went out again. And I was fine with it because I recognized that would have been a challenge. And I'm not saying we couldn't have navigated it, but her response was my answer. I knew to ask the question, hey, we're different around this thing that is a core value to me. And we would have to be really skillful to navigate this. There's a lot of things I like here. How do you see this? And just the fact that I asked the question super offended her. I was like, I never saw her again. And I wasn't upset about it, right? It was just like, yep, okay, that would have been a mess. Cool. Third date, had some great dates. We went to like a night telescope event and like looked at the stars through all these, all the astronomy club in Albuquerque. People break out their telescopes and we went and we had a fabulous night. It was awesome, right? And we weren't a fit, right?
Oh, that's right. Here it's really like setting up kind of the boundaries of your life and saying
Totally.
like here's and I'm also guessing that it took a little bit of practice to be able to
Absolutely.
like to recognize it and then to vocalize it, to have a conversation. I'm sure it wasn't just it wasn't an easy thing at first. It took some practice.
It took me a year, literally. It took me a year. Like, how do you do this? And what if I don't have a rule book and I don't have a list with 17 things on it? All I have is my core values. What do I do with them? I honestly didn't know. And it was a year of dating and learning. But what I noticed is I could see where both the alignment and the places where if I was to continue dating this person, some good things would come out of that alignment. And I also saw like that example with the person who is part of a community that has very different views, for instance, LGBTQ humans, especially kids, and that's a horrible thing. They're incredibly homophobic, and that's not I'm not the kind of person who's going to sit there and bite my tongue if somebody says something incredibly homophobic. We're going to have issues. I knew it within 2 or 3 dates, sometimes 20 minutes, right? So that's what I could see, places where I missed, where we had a real strength that we could lean into as two individuals potentially. And I could also see within a couple of dates where those challenges were going to be, things that sometime in the past literally took me a decade. My first marriage came apart after a decade. And now I can say, oh, I could have seen that in 2 or 3 dates. Took me a decade. I'm a slow learner. Oh, well.
Well, I'm in the same boat. I think in looking back in my relationship, there were things that were important to me, like working together on social causes is something that's, we share that. And like my wife, she is incredibly active and promotes a lot of things, but she's not going to get up and do that work. She's not going to talk about that work. It's not as important to her, to me. And she does amazing stuff. But when I look back, I realized that I stepped over that. And I think in part, and my question is, what do you think has a step over those things? Like when we know something is off and we step over it.
Yeah, and I would say that's on me.
Yeah, no,
right?
It's totally
if
on.
I
It's
step,
totally
if I
on us.
step over it.
Yeah, and it takes courage. We're bringing up courage again. It takes courage to be able to say, I don't think this is going to work because of this thing. Because we're afraid. Because I was afraid that no one else would like me.
Exactly. That's the piece, Joey. And part of that dating experiment was to realize, especially I was talking to a friend at this phase of my life. Now I'm 54. This dating experiment I'm talking about, we're talking 2020. So I was 52, 51, 52. Now I have a lot of sense. Like as I was dating, I realized that this phase of my life, I'm pretty healthy. I'm in a level of physical fitness that most men my age are not. I have a successful business. I'm not uber wealthy, but I'm quite comfortable. I don't need a sugar mama. I emotionally, I have a master's degree in counseling and studied emotional intelligence for decades. I have friends that I can lean into when things get hard. I have community. I own my own condo. It's a really nice place. Like, I have a baseline of stability that many women are really attracted to. And it took me a while to realize that in the dating marketplace, if we can use that, I have some things to offer and I don't have to settle. And when I settle, or when I like tone down, the other thing is, we actually, Eva and I were just talking about this yesterday. We're both a little intense, right? I'm a New York Jew and I'm kind of intense. And like, I can also I'm an introvert. I can be quiet, but I have strong beliefs. And it can feel like, well, nobody would want that, right? And that dating experiment with the values first, what I found is that that I have qualities and I'm at a phase of my life and I have certain things to bring to the table, that there are women who are incredibly attracted to that and value that. And actually, I didn't realize it, but there were women who make a lot of money, women who were 15 and 20 years younger than me. Like that wasn't what I was just dating, but I was like, you know what? Actually, I have some things that mean that I have some choices and I don't have to settle here. And I can be more selective than what I understood when I, let's say, was dating my child's mother, going back, child's 22, going back 25, 30 years ago. I didn't know that I had certain, and I was in a different phase. I didn't own a property. I didn't make much money. I was a social worker. I was still rougher around the edges in certain ways, right? So who I am now, not that I think like every woman's good, but there's plenty of options. And I could, especially if I took my time, I could be choiceful and I would have good choices. I was just talking to my child today. There's 4 grad schools that they got into, and the big dilemma in their life is which of these awesome programs should they choose, right? That year of dating in a values-based way, I had way more options, and that was surprising to me. And it took a while to kind of rewire my nervous system that I have options and that I could be choiceful and I could be who I am, a little extra, a little intense, who runs ultra marathons in their mid-50s? It's weird, but that's what I do, right? And it turns out that's attractive to a certain population.
Do you think you could have heard that podcast 20 years ago?
No.
And so there was something, because I think it goes, to me, it sounds like it goes a little bit of both ways. One, you reached a certain point where you could hear the podcast, where you're like, I think I can apply these values.
Totally.
And I'm also guessing that thinking about those values actually strengthen those values in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll tell you the story of how it played out with the woman I'm dating now. Our very first date was February 20th, 2020. We went on 3 dates and then the world shut down. Because of COVID.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
3 dates.
3 dates.
Awesome dates. Wonderful dates. And I also learned to be more patient and just, we went to a planetarium and saw this, thing about fractals. It was fascinating, right? Like we did some awesome things, had a wonderful Italian meal on our very first date. It was like we did some wonderful things, but like we barely knew each other and the world was shutting down and everybody was like, who's in my bubble? And she basically said, so, I'm not really interested, COVID and blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to figure out like who my bubble is. And, I'm going to be really careful. She has elderly parent and a child still at home. And, I need to figure out who's in my bubble. If you're interested in dating lots of people or you're not really serious about this, I need to know because then I'm done. Like, I like you, right? Are you interested in a serious relationship, right? 3 dates. And I said, it depends. And she said, what does it depend on? And I told her everything I just told you. I'm dating by core values. So you're asking, how do I weave it into the conversation? I didn't weave it into the conversation until it was time. I was using it to vet and steer and guide and notice. And then when it came time of like, all right, it was probably faster than we would have had that conversation about exclusivity, but it was a safety issue. And she said, are you interested? I said, I really like you. And here's values-based dating. Cocoon. Well, it turns out she's a Jewish activist, a Jewish activist social worker who's an abolitionist, and her area of passion is around the prison industrial complex, and she's really concerned about what's happening with the criminalization of so many communities, but especially marginalized communities. I was like, oh, hell yeah, right? She's been working on it for decades, right? Really deeply looking at that issue and many, many other issues that are adjacent to it. I was like, check. I said, second one is mutuality. I have a lot of history of non-mutual. She said, oh boy, tell me about it. And she told me some of her history. It's like, yep, I so want to be that partner for somebody who really values that. It's like, great. Last one is adventure, right? And, told her about some of the things I do. And again, doesn't have to be this extreme stuff. She says, I love to travel and do this. She told me what adventure looks like for her. And I said, well, let's do that. Like, I'm in, right? Sign me up for the next installment. That's what I told her. And she said, where have you been all my life? And it's been the best 2 years of my life.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Oh, there's so much. We'll have to do another, because it's so much there. Because one of the big questions is, right, is how can we pass down this idea of values to people that are younger? How could our younger self could have heard these? And I don't know that answer. This is one of the things that I'm trying to put out here is thinking about what is the relationship that we want. And it starts with us. Like, that's the work. All those things are not things that you were thinking about hypothetically. Those are like true live things to you, that were reflections of who you were. And I'm guessing you weren't perfect at those. Like those you must have been growing those, and everything.
Absolutely.
And I think we can share. I mean, my goal is to share this, and that's part of the reason of the podcast, is share this idea to even younger folks. Like, hey, what does adventure look like to you? And have those conversations.
Yeah, totally. I know how to do it with younger people in the realm of business, but like I said, Joey, I've had a lot of messy relationships, and right now I'm just enjoying the hell out of this really sweet ride with an incredible woman who really is interested in mutuality in some of the other places. Like, she's showing up for me in ways I sometimes there's just tears coming down my face, because I'm like, I didn't even know this was a thing.
That's awesome.
I just don't even know it. And I tell my friends, and they're like, you got a good one. My dad, can you swear on this podcast? I don't know how Yeah. Okay. My parents met my girlfriend this past winter, and my dad driving me to the airport, they live in Florida. Dad said, you got a good one. Don't fuck it up. I'm like, Dad, you're right. I got a good one. Like, everybody in my network, and her family adores me. They're like, they call me Pablo. Her dad's from Mexico. They're like, Pablo, he's such a good fit for you. We love Pablo. Don't mess it up.
Don't mess it up. That's
so
good.
Like, our circles see the fit. They get it. Whereas some of the other partners, I'll tell you another story. My 10-year-old nephew, who met my previous partner, after he met my current girlfriend, he turned to his mom and he said, Mom, I like this one much better than the other one. She's not so serious. That's how my 10-year-old nephew said it, right? But literally, whether it's one of my best friends who met her, or my dad, don't fuck it up, or my nephew, or her sister, or her brother, or her cousin, they're just like, these two make sense. They fit, right? We feel it, but so does our community.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I think the one thing I would put out is, I think we can talk about these things a little bit sooner than we, I think there's a movement of people who are starting to talk about this more, and it's being led in just people, examples like you. And I think we can start to bring it up, just like whatever it was 30 years ago, we weren't talking values in business. And now it's like the first thing you talk about almost.
So the one nuance I might suggest, Joey, is like, when you're dating, sometimes I've been that person that jumps in, like, let's go to the hardest thing on the very first, this complete, like, yes, or we can front load it fairly, but also like give some room to, like, who is this person? And like, just eat the freaking food or see learn about fractals together or go on the hike. Like sometimes, especially as an intense person, I've tried to push too fast. A mentor of mine taught me about the skills of micro risks, taking micro risks. So instead of coming in with the full values-based dating and where do you do on the very first, like lean in a little bit, tell a story. Actually, I met my current girlfriend on Bumble, and we met online. And one of the things I put, there was a prompt, 2 truths and a lie. And one of the prompts that I put was like, I don't remember the lie, but one of the truths was that I spent a night in a snow cave with 7 other people, which was true. She said, oh, that's a lie. And I said, no, actually, that's truth. I was up in Colorado and a storm came in and it was a wild storm. We were backcountry skiing up in the mountains behind Leadville. Leadville's at 10,000 feet. We were probably at close to 12,500. It was a wild storm. We dug out a snow cave and a snowbank, and all 7 of us were in there cozy and warm. Well, there was this howling storm. We had to spend the better part of 24 hours. We were like sweating in this snow cave while it was howling, freezing cold. It was awesome, right? But I tried to it was a micro risk. I took a little risk saying, hey, adventure is important to me, even in my dating profile, right? But I didn't on the very first date say, let me tell you about values. So everything you're saying is true. And I needed to learn the skill of micro risks and take a risk. How do they respond? Then take another risk without dumping it all out on the table on the first date, which can be a real turnoff.
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I'm probably a little bit too on the serious side, and that's something I'm learning as well. But I think but I love the idea of micro risk, having a little bit of courage and bringing that in. And also just in terms of a dating profile, when you know your core values, you can sort of sprinkle that through. You don't have to be overt about it, but you can kind of and then it's more authentic and real. You're not actually pretending. You're like, hey, I actually did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we have been talking a while here. I like to wrap up. I have these questions I've been asking people to just to finish up because I think they're fun. What is a book or a movie or something that has been fostering love or romance for you?
Oh, wow. Love or romance for me. Oh, goodness. My girlfriend and I like to watch Queer Eye together. It's so sweet. And the way they look at somebody's life in a holistic way, the inside, the clothes they're wearing, the home, the food they're eating, it's just, and the care and the love that they bring to the people that are on the show getting I think it's called Beyond the Makeover is one of the seasons. It's not just a surface makeover. They're really trying to help somebody find their way of being in the world in all these domains. So we love to watch that together. And it's very sweet. We turn to each other, that was so sweet, and give each other a kiss. It's very sweet.
Yeah. Your a favorite date, a date idea, something you might suggest people to give a try?
That experience of going to the fractal thing, and then most recently we went to the Van Gogh experience. So experience dates. There's all this kind of multimedia experience stuff, whether it's fractals or Van Gogh. It's just an immersive experience, and it gives you. We're both introverts, so it gives us something to experience together, not have to talk all the time. You can see something and say, oh, that's cool, and then pause and notice and have an experience together without when you go to dinner, it's the food's nice, but it's more work for me as an introvert as opposed to something like that, a hike or an immersive experience of some kind.
Oh, awesome. I always had the idea that introverts become extroverts when they meet the right people.
Oh, totally.
And what is something that you love, something silly or fun that you just love unabashedly?
It's nature. I don't know if it's silly. It's nature, Joey. I'm so passionate. Nature is my church and the place I go to restore. And it brings tear to my eyes, whether it's a mile from my house is the Bosque, the largest cottonwood continuous kind cottonwood forest in the world. It's about a mile from my house, and I run there regularly. And the cranes and the geese, the wild geese. Remember Mary Oliver's poem, The Wild Geese? Every time I run this time of year, there's literally wild geese honking over my head, or the mountains, which are really wild here in New Mexico. Just nature brings a tear to my eye over and over and over again.
Awesome. And if you could ask anyone, what does love mean to you? Who would that person be?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a continuous, Pablo Neruda has a poem and has some advice, and he basically says, be continuously fascinated by your partner. He's known for having these incredibly erotic and romantic poems that he wrote to the same woman for decades. And when asked about that, he said, just who Eva is, like, I'm fascinated by her and how she thinks about love and relationships. Like, I keep learning more and more and more. So I have asked her, but I keep learning more nuances and have some inkling of what Pablo Neruda was pointing to. And he says, become fascinated by your partner.
That's awesome. And then lastly, is there anything out of this conversation that you thought about newly? Is there anything you're taking away from this call?
That piece around just that micro risks. I hadn't thought about that for a while, but that's a skill that was very front and center for me, both in business and in dating, for quite some time. And I forgot about it because I'm not actively dating. I'm very happily in a committed relationship right now. So it kind of slipped to the background, and bringing that to the foreground, I'm like, that I got so much out of that. So I'm going to take it out of my back pocket and put it in my front pocket again.
It makes me think of, there's always the challenge of you go from a dating life, which is fun and exciting, and it's very easy to drop into something that's less than that. And I'm thinking bringing micro risks to a committed relationships. What would that look like? That would be kind of an interesting conversation.
Totally. Yeah. And I still practice it, but I'm not as conscious of it as a tool in my toolkit. So yeah, I'm making a commitment to myself to bring it out of my back pocket and put it more in my front pocket.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to thank you. This has been great. I love, this has been really, really wonderful. Any last words?
Just listeners, if you don't already know this, Joey's awesome, and reach out to him if you need a thought partner around this stuff, because he's awesome at it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And yes, everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening to this. This is the Love Launch Podcast. And my goal, this is what I say, is when two people can come together and fall in love, that is a triumph of the human spirit. And I hope that we can help make that happen in some way through this podcast. If you have questions, let me know. Please, like, share, do all that kind of stuff, because the more of us that are talking about what love means to me, I think we have a greater chance of actually making it happen. Thank you as always, and I'll talk to you next time on the Love Launch Podcast. Bye.